We're at the Parks Associates Connections Conference at CTIA, and we're with Steve Willmott of 3scale. And you were just on the panel about applications and that sort of thing. Why don't you first tell us a little bit about 3scale, and then we'll have a conversation.
Sure. So 3scale, we're an API infrastructure company. What that means is we help our customers open their backend systems, servers, databases, transaction capabilities as kind of the underlying layer for mobile apps and for partnerships. So if they want a mobile app to access content, or they want to push transactions into their system, or they want to partner with someone, they want to enable to do that, we enable that for them. So we do access control, rate limits, analytics, a lot of that kind of security layer, let's say.
So I'd imagine you have kind of a multiple customers in your customer base, service providers being one of them, and
yeah, it's extremely broad. So we have customers like Skype, for example, which really uses us to open up, their partner program. Okay. We have media companies like the Daily Telegraph in the UK, like IGN, which is part of News Corp for gaming data. We have US Department of Energy. We have a whole bunch of different kind of customer types that want to open their data or open their transaction systems to third parties.
So are you seeing any particular sector kind of taking the lead right now, or?
Well, it's we always look for it. We always think like, where's the pattern? But it's really very, very broad. So we have literally kind of from music data to data about the public transport system in London. And I think the reason that's happening is that different areas are just seeing this value at the same time. Mm-hmm. I think mobile apps have kind of evolved from being static initially. They were running on the phone, then they started pulling data in a proprietary way, and then people started to realize you could open your backend system for pretty much any access, right? Not just your own apps, but whoever else wanted to use it. So it's kind of happened at the same time. Yeah.
So are these providers, who are opening up the API, they've got their data, what sort of compensation are they expecting in return for, kind of this open API?
Well, there's a lot of different business models. So typically people used to ask this question, why would I do this? And what kind of business model should I apply from API? But I think that's one of the big things that's changed. Now it's actually really, what kind of API do I need for a business model? So, for example, Walgreens opened an API last year. So why would they do that? Well, with the Walgreens API, you can actually push photos to be printed, and you can push prescriptions. Okay. That's Walgreens' core business, right? Printing photos, filling prescriptions. And they don't really mind where those transactions come from. They could come from their own mobile app, or they could come from partners. So they're not going to charge for access to the API because it's driving them business. Right. Another, so a customer of ours, Music Match, they own rights for the lyrics from the big four majors. You can integrate that into any mobile app and have legal lyrics in your app, and they'll charge you a micropayment, and then they'll go pay Sony and EMI and whoever else. So in that case, they're charging for access. So there's a lot of different models, and I think typically people are just layering it on top of what their existing business is and seeing new opportunities with that.
Now, you work on the apps. I mean, the Walgreens one is a case in point. I've been wondering why someone hasn't developed a plugin, for instance, for WordPress to have like a nice photo sharing site that then you click and it goes right to the Walgreens site, as an example. Yeah,
I'm sure that's coming, and the API can enable that, right? So off a WordPress site, off even off an Instagram or whatever other kind of channel you could imagine, if Walgreens gets there and makes that partnership, that's a valuable source of new business for them. So it's definitely having the API there gives them the potential to make those partnerships.
But you focus on the API part of it. You wouldn't work on the plugin, for instance.
No, we focus on the management of that infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So how do you when you do this, you're opening up your backend system. So how do you keep it secure? How do you know who's using it? How do you issue the right rights to each of the different partners? Keep control of that, and that's really what we focus on. And we'll give our customers help and advice on how to do the app part of it. But typically we help on managing the technical operations and also the business relationships that they have to build to make these things work.
In your model, do you do it as kind of a managed provider or service type thing where they just, you handle it all, or do you actually get into their servers and kind of make it work?
So we have a SaaS platform. So that means a lot of the brains are distributed around different servers that we manage. Mm-hmm. So it's all in the cloud. And the customer has multiple options as to how to integrate that with their system. So typically they'll have a control system that they'll install, which is based on some open source systems, and they can put that in front of their infrastructure wherever it is. So if they're using 5 data centers, they could have 5 of these control nodes, and they synchronize with our systems. So they really don't have to deploy a lot of stuff, but they get a lot of brains, just in keeping track of everything that's happening.
Yeah, in that scenario, it sounds like you kind of have the brains in the background, but it isn't necessarily monitoring the heartbeat. I mean, you don't know the flow of data that's through there and that kind of stuff, right?
Well, we know the flow of data because that's what's the monitoring and control boxes are telling us, but the data does not flow through us.
It's in there, yeah.
And that's actually really important because often you're talking about private data, sensitive data in various ways.
Descriptions and
Right, exactly. And so the data doesn't have to flow, it doesn't flow through 3scale itself. It still goes directly to each of the endpoints the customer defines. But we're the control layer around that. So not the data delivery layer, we're the control layer.
That makes sense. Well, you talked about mobile, but it seemed like on your panel there's something about connected TV on there. So how's that relating to this?
Well, I think one of the things that's happening is that if you look at pretty much any company today, whether it be content, e-commerce, or even infrastructure, they want to be present in the home. They want to be available to the customer wherever the customer wants them. So if you're talking about Pandora, for example, you'd have Pandora on your TV, but you might want it on a gadget in your shower as well. Mm-hmm. Like if you like to sing in the shower, hey, why not, right? The Pandora app by itself doesn't have content, right? It's the service that you want to get to that place. Mm-hmm. So an API enables kind of you to get to each of those different locations, and it might be an Android app, but it could be something completely different. So Skype, for example, they run on all sorts of different platforms, different types of chips, different types of OSs, because they just want to be wherever people communicate. Mm-hmm. That's really the objective. And so the home is becoming one of those places where, as a content or an e-commerce provider, hey, can I be integrated with where my customer needs me? And that might be on a TV, because there's a lot more TVs in the world than there are laptops, and that will probably continue to be so. Is it on an Android-powered oven? Mm-hmm. Right? Those are the kind of things that are going to be out there. So,
And so where do you stop, and where does middleware start? Is there kind of a demarcation there?
Well, we kind of wrap around the middleware. So a company will have its own servers with its own data that's collecting and its own transaction capability. But then it'll have either devices out in the world that they've sold if they're a hardware company, or they'll be connecting into Android, iOS, or whatever other devices, or server side if it's a partnership. So those remote systems have to communicate back to the mothership. And so we help the mothership manage all that interaction and keep it secure. That's kind of where we're kind of the gatekeeper on the edge, if you like.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just wanted to make sure we had it for clarification purposes. So, I really appreciate your chance to meet you, and look forward to further conversations about where this is going.
Okay, great. Well, thanks very much, and I appreciate the time.